Imagine paying your taxes, not in money, but in your own sweat, under a sun that wants to break you. Most people think the pyramids were built by slaves. They are wrong. They were built by men like Khenti before we step into his world, 4,500 years ago. Tell me in the comments which ancient civilization fascinates you the most. Let's see who wins today. The world tells a lie. They say these mountains of stone, the pyramids, were built by the whipped backs of slaves. They are wrong. They were built by the sweat of a nation, by men who saw their labor not just as a burden, but as a sacred tax to the living God. Imagine a world where your currency isn't gold or silver, but your own strength, given freely to a pharaoh who bridges the gap between heaven and earth before we step into the dust, 4,500 years ago. I want to know who is traveling with us today. Drop a comment below and tell me, where in the world are you watching this from? Let's see how far the legacy of the Nile reaches. We are in the year 2500 BC, the reign of the great pharaoh Khufu. That is the season of Akhet. The inundation. To the south, the mountains of the moon have wept, and the Nile has answered. The life-giving river has broken its banks, spilling over the black earth of the valley. The fields where Khenti usually guides his plow are gone, replaced by a vast, shimmering mirror of water, reflecting the bruising blue of the Egyptian sky. When the fields sleep beneath the flood, the farmers wake to a different call. This is the time of equity. The labor-tax. For 3 months. Khenti must trade his wooden plow for a copper chisel and a heavy rope. He is no longer a sower of seeds. He is a builder of eternity. Khenti is 28. His skin the color of polished cedar, burned deep by a sun that knows no mercy. He stirs in the pre-dawn gloom of his home. In the workers' village, the air inside the mud brick walls is cool, but thick with the scent of damp earth, dried fish, and the faint, sweet musk of the nearby river. His house is a simple geometry of sun-dried mud and straw. He feels the grit of the packed dirt floor beneath his feet, a constant reminder of the world he is made of. Beside him, Nefret, his wife, moves in the shadows like a ghost of grace. She is the anchor of his world, already tending to the small hearth, where the embers of last night's fire still glow. Like the eyes of a desert cat, their 2 children sleep on a nearby reed mat, their breathing rhythmic and shallow, unaware that their father is about to depart for the plateau of Giza, where the sky is being conquered by a stone. In the corner, his elderly mother sits, her hands gnarled like the roots of an old sycamore, already busy with the day's first task. Breakfast is a functional ritual. Nefret hands him a thick, heavy slab of emmer wheat bread. Is dense and coarse, and as Khenti bites into it, he feels the familiar crunch of fine desert sand that has found its way into the flour during the grinding process. It is a grit he has tasted since he was a child, the literal taste of his land. To wash it down, he drinks from a clay jar of thick, unfiltered beer. It is not the clear liquid of the modern world. It is a fermented porridge, rich in nutrients, and safer than the water of the stagnant canals. It coats his throat, providing the calories he will need for the grueling hours ahead. This is the fuel of the pyramid builders. Bread, beer, and the occasional green bite of an onion. Khenti gathers his few belongings: a simple linen kilt, a leather satchel, and his copper adze. He pauses at the threshold, looking back at the silhouettes of his family. There's no grand farewell in this world. Duty is as certain as the rising sun. He steps out into the narrow, dusty alleyway of the village. The air is sharp with the smell of wood smoke, and the stirrings of thousands of other men. As he turns his face toward the Giza plateau, he can see the Great Pyramid rising in the distance, a mountain of limestone and ambition. Its white casing stones catching the very first ray of light. Khenti exhales, his breath a faint mist in the morning air. He is a small man in a vast empire. But as he begins the long walk toward the construction site, he knows that without his hands, the pharaoh's soul would never find its way to the stars. The night does not end with a sound. In the village of the builders, It ends with a change in the air. For hours, the darkness has been a heavy, humid shroud, thick with the scent of the receding Nile, and the stagnant heat trapped within mud brick walls inside Khenti's home. There is no breeze. The air is a stationary weight, tasting of salt, old straw, and the collective breath of 3 generations. Khenti lies awake before the light arrives. He is 28 years old. But in the pre-dawn stillness, his body feels older. He lies on a raised mud brick platform, a built-in shelf that keeps him away from the scorpions and the dust of the floor, separated from the hard surface only by a thin, woven reed mat. Every knot in the reeds is a familiar pressure point against his spine. His skin is slick with a fine film of sweat that never truly dries during the season of Akhet. This single room is his entire universe. To a stranger, it might seem a cramped cell of sun-dried earth, but to Khenti, it is a fortress of survival. The walls are thick, nearly 2 cubits of mud and chopped straw, built to absorb the sun's violence by day and release its warmth by night. Above him, the ceiling is a series of palm trunks stretched across the span, covered in layers of matting and more mud. In the corners, the shadows are absolute, hiding the few precious possessions they own. A wooden chest for linen, a few heavy ceramic jars for grain, and the stone grinding slab. That is the heartbeat of the house beside him. Nefret stirs. Her breathing is a soft, rhythmic friction against the silence. She is a shadow within shadows. Her presence a silent comfort that has anchored Khenti. Through 10 years of flood and harvest, on the floor below the platform, his 2 children are tangled together on their own reed mats. They sleep with the profound, heavy abandonment of the young, their limbs splayed out, oblivious to the fact that their father's life is a constant calculation of their hunger. In the furthest corner, near the hearth, his mother is a small, silent mound of linen. She no longer sleeps deeply. She waits for the light with the patience of the ode. Her ears tuned to the first sounds of the village. The silence begins to fracture. It starts with the muffled, guttural bray of a donkey 2 houses away. A lonely, jarring sound that echoes off the flat roofs. Then comes the scrape. The rhythmic stone on stone, scritch, critch, of a neighbor's wife beginning the morning's grind. It is the first note of the village symphony. Khenti listens as the village of the builders begins to exhale. He hears the low murmur of voices through the thin walls, the shuffling of feet in the dusty alleys outside, and the distant haunting cry of a water bird from the marshes. The smell of the room begins to shift. As the first small cooking fires are lit, the scent of wood smoke and dried dung fuel begins to compete with the heavy musk of the mud. Khenti moves to sit up, his muscles protesting with a dull, familiar ache. His shoulders, widened by years of hauling water and stone, feel stiff, like sun-dried leather. He pauses, his feet hovering over the dirt floor. He knows that once his solace touched that earth, the day has claimed him. There's no luxury of lingering. In the old kingdom, time is not measured by the ticking of a clock, but by the relentless progression of the sun across the vault of the sky. He looks at the small, high window. A mere slit in the mud dash brick. It is no longer black. It is a bruised, deep indigo. The great river is out there, invisible in the dark, its waters heavy with the silt of the south, drowning the world so that it might live again. And beyond the river, the plateau waits. The mountain of Khufu waits. Khenti stands. The reed mat creaks. A sharp, dry sound like the snapping of a twig, and the transition begins. The farmer is gone. The builder has arrived. Khenti does not move. He remains suspended in the heavy stillness, his back pressed against the unyielding reed mat. Before he even opens his eyes, his body tells him the story of yesterday. It is a map of localized fire, a sharp, stinging heat in the palms of his hands, where the rough cedar of the sled ropes bit deep, a dull, rhythmic throb in his lower back, and the stiffness in his calves. That feels like the clay of the riverbank drying in the sun. In the old kingdom, labor is not something you do. It is something you inhabit. He lies there, calculating the cost of the coming 12 hours. He thinks of the limestone blocks. Those massive, silent titans that demand everything and give nothing back. He thinks of the ramps, the slick tracks that require every ounce of leverage his frame can muster. His mind drifts to the copper tools back at the site. He wonders if the overseer sharpened the adzes yesterday, or if he will spend the first hour of light fighting a dull blade. Even now, in the season of Akit, when the sun is supposed to be tempered by the floodwaters, the night offers no true reprieve. The heat is a physical presence in the room, a thick invisible curtain that has soaked into the mud brick walls during the day and is now radiating back onto his skin. There is no breeze to stir the heavy air. The sweat on his brow is cold now, but it is a constant sticky reminder of the airless environment. He feels the humidity of the Nile, only a few hundred cubits away, creeping into the house, bringing with it the scent of rotting papyrus and the deep, fertile musk of the silt. Beyond the thick walls of his dwelling, the world is beginning to fracture. The silence of the night is being eaten away by the sounds of a village built for one purpose. Work. It begins with the dogs, the lean, thin village hounds that prowl the alleys, their barks sharp and echoing against the flat roofs. Then, from the communal pens at the village edge, comes the braying of a donkey, a harsh, jagged sound that rips through the indigo gloom. A protest against the burden it knows is coming. Khenti hears the shuffle of feet. Other men like him, with stone dust in their lungs and calluses like horn on their hands, are stirring. He hears the muffled grunt of a neighbor, the clatter of a ceramic jar being moved, and the distant rhythmic thud dash of a woman pounding flax. These are the sounds of the core of E. It is the sound of a machine made of flesh and bone, slowly grinding into motion. If he listens past the village noise, he can hear it. The Nile during the inundation. The river has a voice. It is a low, guttural hum. The sound of millions of tons of water pushing against the banks. Drowning the valley. It is a sound of power and inevitability. Khenti knows that out there. The black earth is being fed, but he will not see it. He will be on the plateau, high above the water, moving mountains for a king who is already a god. He turns his head toward the high, narrow slit that serves as a window. The darkness is no longer absolute. It has begun to thin, turning from the deep velvet black of the abyss into a bruised, watery indigo, a single star. Sothis, the harbinger of the flood, flickers in the opening, pale and dying. The light is not a comfort. It is a countdown. It reveals the dust motes dancing in the air above him, and the rough, textured surface of the mud brick walls, etched with the handprints of those who built this house. Khenti exhales, a long, slow breath that seems to carry the last of his rest with it. He knows the ritual. He knows the expectations of the vizier and the demands of the gods. He feels Nefret stir beside him. A shift in the weight of the mat. A soft sigh of a woman who knows her husband is already leaving her in his mind. The day has not yet broken. But the peace is gone. The Great Pyramid is calling, and its voice is the sound of the world beginning to turn. Khenti finally breaks the paralysis of rest. He moves slowly, rotating his torso with a deliberate, agonizing caution. His spine offers a series of muffled, dry pops. The sound of a body that has spent the previous day acting as a human lever against 3-ton limestone blocks. The stiffness in his shoulders is no longer just a feeling. It is a physical casing. A layer of solidified tension that seems to have fused his muscles to his bones overnight. He sits on the edge of the mud brick platform, his legs dangling, waiting for the blood to find its way back into his extremities. When his feet finally find the floor, the sensation is visceral. The ground is packed earth, tempered with straw and hardened by the footsteps of a decade. It is cool. The only thing in the house that still holds the memory of the night. But it is also gritty. Every step Khenti takes releases a faint, earthy sense of dust and ancient silt. He moves with a hunter's silence. His weight distributed carefully to keep the reed mat from hissing. To wake Nefret or the children now would be a cruelty. They have their own long hours of grinding and weaving ahead, and every moment of sleep is a mercy he intends to guard. He navigates the familiar geometry of the room. By touch alone. He passes the shadow of the grain bin and the silent, cold hearth, his hand grazing the rough texture of the wall for balance. As he ducks beneath the low lintel of the door. He leaves the stale, recycled air of the dwelling behind. The air outside is a revelation. As the blue hour, that fragile bridge between the stars and the sun. The humidity of the Nile is a damp weight on his skin, smelling of wet reeds. And the deep, fertile rot of the riverbanks. The village is a grid of dark, geometric shapes. Rows of identical mud brick houses, their flat roofs jagged against the indigo sky, like the teeth of a giant saw. Khenti walks the narrow alley toward the communal drainage area. At the edge of his block, he is not alone. In the dim light, he sees the silhouettes of other men, a brotherhood of the burdened. They move like ghosts, nodding in silent acknowledgement. But rarely speaking, there's no energy for small talk at this hour. He performs the simple, necessary act of relief. Watching the steam rise from the earth in the cool morning air. Is a primal moment. The body shedding the remnants of the night, preparing for the intake of the day. Returning to the small courtyard of his home, he finds the large, porous clay jar that Nefret filled from the canal the evening before. He pours the water into a shallow basin. The water is the color of weak tea, heavy with the fine gray silt of the Akhet flood. But it is cool. He splashes it over his face, the shock of it snapping the last threads of lethargy from his mind. He rubs the water into the back of his neck, where the sun burned him yesterday, and over his thick, callous forearms. He uses a small scrap of linen to scrub the sleep from his eyes, and the dust of the village from his skin. This is his baptism into the world of the living. A ritual of purification before he approaches the king's work. Now comes the preparation of the self. Khenti reaches for his shendet, a simple wrap of coarse, unbleached linen. He winds it tight around his waist, tucking the end firmly. It must be secure. A loose kilt is a danger near the sled ropes and the heavy rollers. Finally, he reaches for a small stone jar of galena. He dips a small wooden stick into the dark, lead-based paste, and carefully traces a thick line of kohl around his eyes. This is not for vanity. The black pigment serves as a shield, absorbing the blinding glare of the Saharan sun, and keeping the stinging flies from his tear ducts. As he looks into the dark surface of the water in the basin. His own reflection stares back, the dark lines making his eyes look hawk-like and fierce. He is no longer just a husband or a father. He has donned his armor of linen and kohl. He is a laborer of the fourth dynasty, a vital cell in the body of the state. He stands tall, the dampness on his skin already beginning to evaporate. As the horizon turns a bruised, glowing orange, the village is waking, the fires are catching, and the long golden shadow of the pyramid is about to stretch across the world. When Khenti ducks back through the low lintel, the interior of the house feels different. The cool, indigo stillness has been replaced by the first tremors of life. The air is no longer stagnant. It carries the sharp, acrid scent of a fresh fire. As Nefret coaxes the embers back to life in the small hearth, the orange glow flickers against the mud walls, casting long, distorted shadows of the grain jars that dance like giants in the corners. Khenti moves to the center of the room, his skin still damp from his washing. He watches Nefret. She does not look up immediately. Her focus is on the hearth, her lungs providing the steady, gentle breath needed to turn a spark into a flame. This is their wordless morning dance, a synchronized routine perfected over years of shared survival. His eyes drift to the reed mat on the floor. Who is 6, is sprawled on his back, his small chest rising and falling with a deep, effortless peace. Beside him is little Kiaya. Only 3. Her thumb tucked near her mouth, her dark curls matted from the night's heat. Khenti stands over them for a heartbeat, longer than necessary. He looks at their soft, unblemished skin and thinks of the limestone plateau. He knows that in a few years, Amun's hands will begin to thicken and his spine will start to carry the same permanent curve that Khenti feels every morning. Every block he hauls. Today is a sacrifice made to ensure these 2 have the bread they need to grow. They are the seeds of his bloodline. And the house is the soil that protects them. Nefret rises and moves to the storage chest. She pulls out a circular loaf of emmer wheat bread. Baked the previous evening. She taps it against the stone grinding slab. A quick, sharp thud to shake off any loose soot or the ever-present desert grit. In the flickering light, Khenti sees her check the texture. The bread is hard, the crust thick and protective of the soft, sour center. Is the literal foundation of their lives. She places it near the hearth to warm, the scent of toasted grain beginning to fill the small room, a smell that is more comforting to Khenti than the finest incense in a temple. Before they eat, there is the debt to be paid to the unseen. Khenti moves to a small niche carved directly into the mud brick wall. Inside sits a crude clay figurine of Base, the lion-featured protector of households, and a small painted stele of Taret. This is the family's spiritual anchor. He doesn't offer grand hymns. He has no breath for them. Instead, he places a small piece of bread and a few drops of beer into a tiny ceramic bowl at the base of the niche. He murmurs a short, guttural prayer, a plea for protection against the breath of death, for the strength of his knees on the ramps, and for the safety of the roof above his children's heads. That is a practical transaction. He feeds the gods, and in return, he asks them to guard the walls while he is gone. From the furthest, darkest corner, there is a dry, papery rustle. His mother, the matriarch of this small mud fortress, is moving. She rises with a groan that sounds like the grinding of old cedar. Her movements are slow, her joints stiffened by 70 seasons of inundation. But her eyes are sharp as a kite's. The river is high today, she croaks, her voice a rasp of sand and time. The river is always high in Akhet. Mother, Khenti replies softly. It is a heavy flood, she counters. The silt will be deep. The king must be pleased. It is the extent of their conversation. In this house, words are not wasted. They are weighed and measured like grain. A nod, a grunt, a specific look. These are the currencies of their mourning. There is a profound, terrifying predictability to this routine. Every movement, every smell, every sound is an echo of the day before. And the day before that, stretching back to the time of his father's father. This would be a prison. To Khenti, it is the only thing that keeps the chaos of the world at bay. Outside these walls, the Nile can drown the earth, and the king can command the mountains to move. But inside, there is the fire, the bread, the children, and the gods. This is the order of Mat, the balance of the universe, manifesting in a simple act of a woman warming bread for a man about to go to war with stone. There's no table in Khenti's house. There is no finery. As the fire in the hearth settles into a steady, rhythmic pulse of orange, the family gathers on the floor. They squat or sit cross-legged on the packed earth, forming a tight circle around a single woven basket of bread. In the dim light, they are a cluster of shadows and skin. Their movements efficient and practiced. There's a sacredness to this silence. It is the quiet of a crew preparing for a voyage. Nefret reaches into the basket and distributes the loaves. This is emmer wheat bread, the literal backbone of the old kingdom. The loaf is heavy in Khenti's hand, a dense, dark disc that has the weight of a stone. As he breaks it, the sound is not a soft tear, but a dry, woody snap. He takes his first bite, and immediately, the reality of his world manifests in his mouth. The bread is bland, tasting of earth and toasted grain. But beneath the flavor is the texture. Is gritty. No, Matter how carefully Nephrite grinds the grain on the stone, settle, quern, fine particles of the desert wind, and tiny flakes of the grinding stone itself find their way into the flour. Khenti can feel the sand clicking against his molars. A constant, abrasive presence that wears down the teeth of every Egyptian. From the lowless laborer to the pharaoh himself, to eat is to consume the desert. Then comes the beer. Nephrite pours the thick, opaque liquid from a large, wide-necked jar into simple, undecorated clay cups. This is not the celebratory drink of the future. This is ET. It is thick, more like a thin fermented porridge than a beverage, filled with floating bits of spent grain. Khenti drinks deeply. The beer is slightly sour, with a tang that cuts through the dust in his throat. It is safe, far safer than the water from the canals where the village waste gathers. And it is packed with the vitamins and calories he will need to survive the ramps. Even Amun and little TIA reach for their small cups. Their beer is a weaker, second run brew, diluted but still nutritious, providing the fuel their growing bodies need in a world that offers no milk after infancy. They eat with their hands, their fingers stained with the gray dust of the house and the black silt of the river. There are no spoons, no knives, no metal to clink against the clay. The only sounds are the rhythmic chewing of the family, the occasional swallow of beer, and the crackle of the dying fire. The clay bowls are rough and utilitarian, made from the same Nile mud as the house itself. Unglazed and cool to the touch, Khenti watches his children. They eat with a focused intensity, aware on some primal level that this meal must last them until the sun begins to dip. There is no waste. Every crumb that falls onto the reed mat is pinched up between a finger and thumb and consumed. In a land where the granary is the lifeblood of the people, to waste a morsel of emmer is a sin against Matt. The meal is entirely functional. It is a biological transaction. Khenti feels the bread settling in his stomach like a heavy weight, a slow-release anchor of energy. The blandness is its own kind of comfort. It is the taste of the expected. The taste of survival. He wipes the last of the beer froth from his lip with the back of a calloused hand. The heat of the day is already beginning to press against the door, and the indigo of the morning has turned to a pale, expectant gold. He looks at the empty clay cup in his hand. Then, at Nephrite, the meal is over. The fuel has been loaded. Now, the labor must begin. He stands, his knees popping in the quiet room, ready to carry the weight of the king's dream on a stomach full of sand and grain. The meal is finished, and the time for lingering has passed. Khenti stands and reaches for his shendit, the simple linen kilt that is the uniform of the Egyptian laborer. It is made of coarse, unbleached flax, once a bright bone white, but now stained a permanent off-white by years of Nile silt and desert dust. The fabric is thin in places, worn soft by the friction of his thighs, but the weave is strong. He wraps the length of linen around his waist with a practiced, mechanical grace, tucking and knotting the end firmly at his hip. He tugs at it, ensuring it is tight. On the ramps of Giza, a loose garment is a death sentence. If the fabric were to snag under a moving sled or beneath the crushing weight of a rolling log, the stone would not stop for his flesh. Khenti is barefoot. He has never owned a pair of leather sandals. Such luxuries are reserved for the overseers, the scribes, or for the rare, hallowed days of a temple festival. His feet are his truest tools. The skin on his soles is as thick as the hide of a hippopotamus. A dark, cracked landscape of calluses that has been forged by walking over burning sand and jagged limestone shards. He feels the grit of the floor with every toe, his feet gripping the earth with a primal, prehensile strength. To Khenti, the ground is not something to be protected from. It is something to be understood. He moves to the corner of the room where his tools are kept. These are not his property. They belong to the royal treasury of Pharaoh Khufu. But they are his responsibility. If he loses a chisel or breaks a mallet through negligence, the cost will be docked from his family's rations. He picks up the copper chisel. It is heavy, the metal cold and dull in the morning light. Copper is a soft metal, and its edge is fickle. It requires constant sharpening against a whetstone to bite into the Tura limestone. He runs his thumb carefully over the blade, feeling the microscopic nicks from yesterday's labor. Beside it lies his mallet, a heavy, solid cylinder of dark acacia wood, the head scarred and mushroomed from thousands of impacts. He slides the chisel into a simple leather loop at his waist and grips the mallet's handle. The wood is polished to a mirror sheen by the oils of his own palms. While Khenti readies his tools, Nefret is preparing his puree, the midday ration that must sustain him through the furnace heat of the afternoon. She takes a clean scrap of linen and places 2 small, dense loaves of emmer bread inside to this. She adds a single pungent white onion and a small strip of dried tilapia, salted and cured until it is as hard as leather. She ties the linen bundle with a tight knot and hands it to him. Khenti takes it, his fingers brushing hers for a brief, fleeting second. This bundle is his life-line. In the heat of the plateau, when the dust fills his lungs and his muscles begin to scream, the sharp bite of that onion and the salt of the fish will be the only things that keep his mind from drifting into the delirium of exhaustion. Khenti adjusts the leather strap of his satchel over his shoulder. He stands in the center of the room, a man composed of linen, copper, and sun-hardened muscle. He looks at his tools, his food in his hands. Everything is in order. The internal transition is complete. The father and husband has been fully replaced by the laborer. The light through the doorway is now a bright, piercing yellow, and the village outside is a roar of activity. 10,000 men are moving toward the plateau, and Khenti is one of them. He nods to Nefret, a silent, sharp movement, and turns toward the light. He does not look back. To look back is to invite the weight of the day to become unbearable before it has even begun. As Khenti steps over the threshold, he is immediately swallowed by a sea of linen and skin. He is no longer an individual. He is a drop of water in a rising flood. The narrow alleys of the workers' village, once silent and dark, are now pulsing with the heavy, rhythmic tread of thousands of bare feet. The sound is a low, persistent thrum, the heartbeat of the 4th dynasty. Men emerge from every mud brick doorway, their copper tools clinking against their hips like a strange, metallic music. There's little talking. The air is too thick with the dust of the morning and the collective focus of 10,000 minds for idle chatter. They move with a purposeful rolling gait, a silent army marching not to war, but to creation. The path leading away from the village and toward the plateau is a wide, ancient scar upon the land that has been worn smooth by the passage of a generation of builders. The earth packs so hard that it shines like polished stone, and a low light to the left. The palm groves of the Nile Valley stand as dark, feathered sentinels against the orange horizon. Even at this early hour, the smell of the world is changing. The cool, damp musk of the Nile, the scent of wet silt, lotus, and the silver scales of fish is being pushed aside by the rising heat. Already, the sun is a heavy golden hand pressing against the back of Khenti's neck. He can smell the parched dust of the desert, the sharp scent of cedar wood from the shipyard ramps, and the faint, acrid tang of wood smoke lingering in the air. As the path rounds a bend in the terrain, the palm trees give way to the stark, unforgiving landscape of the plateau, and there, emerging from the morning mist like a god rising from the primeval waters, is the great house of Khufu. Even for Khenti, who has walked this path every day of the Akhet season, the sight is overwhelming. The Great Pyramid is already a mountain of stone, its base a perfect, terrifying geometry of white Tura limestone that seems to glow with its own internal light. Higher up, the rough-hewn yellow core blocks rise in jagged steps, crawling with thousands of men who look like ants on a honeyed hive. The scale is so vast, it defies the eye. It is as if the pharaoh has commanded the very earth to reach up and touch the sun. The quiet of the village is now completely shattered. As Khenti nears the site, he is met by a wall of sound. The industrial roar of the 26th century BC. It is the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of 100 mallets hitting stone. The high-pitched tink of copper chisels. The deep, guttural chants of the hauling gangs. And the agonizing groan of massive cedar sleds sliding over mud-slick tracks. The air is thick with a fine, white powder. Limestone dust. It coats everything. The workers' hair, their skin. The few scrubby bushes at the edge of the desert. It turns their sweat into a thin, white paste. And clogs their nostrils. Khenti navigates the chaos of the supply lines, dodging a water carrier with a yoke and a group of stone masons, arguing over a plumb line. He heads toward the eastern face. Looking for the standard of his work gang, he spots it. A wooden pole topped with the carved head of a jackal. The enduring one's gang got, these are the 20 men he has sweated beside for years. He sees his foreman. A man with a chest like a barrel and skin the color of dark iron. Already checking the ropes on a 3-ton block of yellow limestone. Khenti takes his place. He does not need to be told what to do. He grips his copper chisel, feels the familiar weight of the mallet in his other hand, and looks up at the massive wall of stone. The journey is over. The tax is being paid. The mountain is waiting. Khenti does not climb the ramps today. Instead, he descends into the limestone quarry. A vast, man-made canyon of white and gold cut into the very bones of the Giza Plateau. The quarry is a place of hard angles and sharp shadows. Massive walls of rock rise on all sides, tiered like the steps of a giant, showing the precise scars where thousands of blocks have already been birthed from the living earth. Here. The air is different. It is trapped. Devoid of the slight breeze that occasionally skips across the top of the plateau. It is a basin of stagnant heat and pulverized stone. As Khenti steps onto the quarry floor, his bare feet sink into a soft, thick carpet of limestone dust. A fine white powder that looks like snow, but feels like hot ash. Khenti's assignment is not the dramatic extraction of a new block, nor the precision carving of the casing stones. Today, he is tasked with the clearance and smoothing. The tedious, invisible labor that keeps the great project moving. He is given a large broom made of bundled palm fronds and a heavy copper chisel. His first task is to clear the debris from a row of finished yellow core blocks that were pried loose by the night shift. He sweeps with a rhythmic, sweeping motion, the palm fronds scratching against the stone. With every stroke, a fresh cloud of white dust rises, coating his shins, his kilt, and his eyelashes. Within minutes, he looks like a ghost. A man turned to stone once the dust is cleared. The real work begins. He squats beside a 3-ton block. It is rough, with jagged ridges and lips left behind by the wooden wedges used to split it. If these blocks are not smooth, they will not sit true on the pyramid's core. And a single uneven stone could compromise the geometry of the entire monument. Khenti places the tip of his copper chisel against a stubborn ridge. Tink, tink, tink. The sound is high-pitched and metallic, echoing off the quarry walls. He swings his acacia wood mallet with a short, controlled stroke. He is not trying to shatter the stone. He is shaving it. Every impact sends a spray of razor-sharp stone chips flying. One catches him on the cheek, drawing a thin line of red that is immediately swallowed by the white dust. He does not flinch. This is the repetitive, hypnotic rhythm of his existence. Strike, shave, move. Strike, shave, move. He is surrounded by a cacophony of production. The quarry is a factory of flesh. To his left, a team of wedgemen are hammering dried wooden stakes into a pre-cut trench in the rock face. Soon, they will pour water over them, letting the wood swell until the rock groans and snaps. To his right, a group of haulers are greasing a cedar sled with thick animal fat. The sound is a wall of noise, the rhythmic thud of hundreds of mallets, the screech of stone against stone, and the constant, high-pitched song of copper on limestone. It is a symphony of construction that has not stopped for 20 years. Above the den, the foreman's voice cuts through the air like a whip. He stands on a higher ledge, a reed staff in one hand and a scribe's palette in the other. He is not just watching for laziness. He is watching for quality. Khenti. Lower the edge on the southern corner, the foreman bellows, gesturing with his staff. The vizier does not want gaps for the desert wind to play in. Smooth it. Or you'll stay until the moon rises. Khenti doesn't look up. He simply adjusts his grip on the mallet dot. The foreman's instructions are just another element of the environment. Like the sun or the dust, he knows his task, he knows the stone. The sun has now cleared. The horizon entirely dot is no longer a gentle light. It is a predatory force dot in the basin of the quarry. The white limestone acts as 1,000 mirrors, reflecting the heat and glare back at Khenti from every angle. The coal around his eyes is already beginning to run, mixed with sweat and stone dust. Stinging his vision, the temperature is rising by the minute. The copper chisel in his hand is growing hot to the touch. Khenti's mouth is bone dry. The taste of the morning beer long gone, replaced by the gritty, chalky taste of the quarry. He's only 2 hours into his shift, and already his muscles are beginning to hum with the first tremors of fatigue. But the block is not yet smoothed out and in the service of Khufu. The stone always comes first. The sun is no longer an orb in the sky. It has become the sky itself, dot by mid-morning. The Saharan sun has reached a height where it strips the world of its shadows, dot in the limestone quarry. There is nowhere to hide. The white walls of the pit act as a solar trap, catching every ray and bouncing it back with a blinding, crystalline intensity. Khenti can feel the heat radiating upward from the stone floor. Through the thick calluses of his feet, his skin, once bronze and dry, is now a slick, shimmering mask of sweat. The moisture does not cool him. It merely traps the fine limestone dust, turning it into a white, chalky paste that fills every crease of his elbows, the hollow of his throat, and the lines of his face. His linen kilt, his only protection, is now heavy and sodden. Dot. It clings to his thighs, darkened to a dull gray by the mixture of sweat and silt. Dot. Every time he moves to adjust his position, the wet fabric chafes against his skin. A minor irritation that, over hours, begins to feel like the bite of a serrated blade. His hair, cropped short to discourage lice, is now a matted cap of white powder. Even his eyelashes are heavy with it. Making every blink a conscious effort, he breathes through his nose, trying to filter the air. But the back of his throat is already coated in a dry, bitter film. He tastes the mountain. He swallows the mountain. The labor has entered its most dangerous phase, the phase of the waking sleep. Khenti's movements have become entirely mechanical. Strike, sweep, move, strike, sweep, move. He no longer thinks about the Great Pyramid or the Kings. Journey to the stars. His world has shrunk to the size of a single limestone edge. He clears a pile of chips with his palm prawn broom. The sound a dry, scratching whisper against the rock. Then he resets his copper chisel. The mallet falls with a weary, reliable thud. The vibration of the impact travels up his arm, rattling his teeth and vibrating through his shoulder blades. It is a rhythm that numbs the mind, a monotonous heartbeat that keeps him moving even as his muscles begin to fray around him. 20 other ghosts are doing the same. They are close enough to hear each other's heavy, labored breathing, but they are miles apart in their thoughts. Occasionally, a man will grunt as he shifts a particularly stubborn chip, or a neighbor might mutter a brief curse as a chisel tip dulls. But for the most part, the quarry is a cathedral of silence, broken only by the metallic clink of copper. There's no energy for the jokes of the morning, or the complaints of the night. Every word spoken is a loss of moisture, a waste of breath. They are like oxen in a field, plowing through the hours, their eyes fixed on the ground, waiting for the yoke to be lifted. Time has changed its nature. In the village, time was marked by the shadows and the chores of the family. Here, time is measured in chips of stone. Khenti finds himself counting the mallet strikes. 100, then 200, hoping that when he reaches 1,000, the overseer will signal the water break. He looks at the sun. Squinting through the coal-smeared glare, it seems to have snagged on the edge of the sky, refusing to move toward the noon point. The thirst is no longer a localized itch in his throat. It is a hollow ache that reaches into his very bones. His stomach, once full of the morning's bread and beer, is now a tight, empty knot. Khenti resets his chisel one more time. His hand is cramping, his fingers locking around the wooden handle of the mallet in a permanent, claw-like grip. He has to consciously pry them open to stretch the tendons. He looks at the block of stone. It is a 3-ton monster that will outlive him by thousands of years. It is his master. And he is its sculptor. He draws a breath of hot, dusty air, wipes the stinging sweat from his eyes with his forearm, and swings the mallet again. The cycle must continue. The king's house must be built, and Khenti must endure, until the sun finally grants him the mercy of a shadow. There comes a point, in the middle of the morning, where Khenti's body and mind finally separate. His muscles have moved past the initial shock of pain, and into a state of hypnotic automation. His right arm swings the mallet in a perfect 3-span arc. His left hand adjusts the copper chisel with the precision of a jeweler. He no longer feels the individual impact of the wood on metal. He has become a rhythmic extension of the quarry itself, a biological tool designed to shape the earth, with the physical task relegated to muscle memory. His mind is free to flee. It escapes the blinding white walls of the Giza pit and the suffocating dust, drifting like a bird over the plateau and down toward the lush, drowned valley of his home. His thoughts settle first on a G, R, and a RY dot in his mind's eye. He sees the clay-sealed jars tucked into the cool corner of his house. He counts them over and over. Was it 6 jars of emmer? Or 7? He calculates the daily portions Nefret must scoop out for the children and his mother. The fear is a quiet, constant hum beneath his ribs. The fear of the short year. If the Akhet flood is too high, the grain may rot. If it is too low, the harvest will fail. He wonders if the seals on the jars are holding against the mice, or if the dampness of the flood air has begun to turn the grain sour. These are the thoughts that haunt a farmer turned builder. The terrifying math of survival. He thinks of his mother. He remembers the sound of her cough that morning, a dry, rattling sound that seemed to echo the scraping of his own chisel. In the heat of the quarry. The memory of that cough feels cold. He worries about the winter fever that often follows the receding of the waters. He wonders if Nefret has enough honey and garlic to treat her, or if they will have to trade their few dried fish for a charm from the village healer. He pictures Nefret at the loom or the grinding stone. He hopes she hasn't had to scold Ammon too harshly for wandering too close to the canal. He imagines the children's laughter, a sound so far removed from the metallic clink of the quarry that it feels like a memory from another life. As the exhaustion deepens, his thoughts become more fragmented. He remembers the taste of a particularly sweet sycamore fig he ate a year ago. He wonders if the pharaoh in his palace of cedar and gold can feel the same sun, or if the gods have granted him a private wind. He thinks about the great river, the Nile, and wonders if the fish are plentiful this season, and if his neighbor is successfully poaching in the marshes while the men are away at the site, while his mind wanders. The sun remains his constant, brutal companion. Is the eye of unblinking and judgmental. It beats down on his bare shoulders. The heat so intense that the sweat begins to dry before it can even drip, leaving behind a white, salty crust on his skin. He feels his pulse thumping in his temples, keeping time with his mallet. Thump strike. Thump strike. The world is reduced to this binary existence. There's the mind, which is a farmer in a green field, and there's the body, which is a ghost in a white tomb. A sudden, sharp sting on his thumb snaps the thread of his daydream. A small shard of limestone has caught the flesh. Drawing a bead of dark blood, Khenti blinks, the white glare of the quarry rushing back to fill his vision. The green fields of his mind vanish. He is back in the pit. The mallet feels heavy again. His back screams for a reprieve. He realizes he has been working on the same corner of the block for an hour without truly seeing it. He shakes his head, clearing the dust from his lashes. The trance is a mercy, but it is a dangerous one. A slip of the chisel could ruin a week's worth of work. He refocuses his gaze, adjusts his grip on the hot wood of the mallet, and prepares to inhabit his body once more. The break is coming, it has to be coming. The relief does not come as a sound. But as the absence of one, the foreman raises his reed staff high and lets out a sharp, guttural cry that cuts through the industrial roar. One by one, the mallet stop. The high-pitched tink of the chisels dies away. For a heartbeat, the quarry is plunged into a sudden, ringing silence. That feels as heavy as the stone itself. Khenti drops his mallet, his fingers locked in a permanent claw shape. Protest as he forces them to open. He lets the copper chisel fall into the white dust. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have the moisture for it, like a herd of thirsty cattle. The Enduring One's gang moves toward the edge of the quarry floor. They huddle beneath a temporary shelter. A skeletal frame of rough-hewn acacia poles, draped with ragged mats of woven palm fiber. Is not cool here. The shade is merely a reprieve from the direct assault of the sun. The air remains a thick, dusty soup of 110 degrees. But to Khenti, stepping out of the glare feels like stepping into a tomb. He collapses onto the ground, his back finding the jagged, unyielding surface of a half-finished block. The stone is hot. But it is solid. It is a place to stop being a machine for a few minutes. The water carrier arrives. A young boy, no older than Khenti's son, Amin, staggering under the weight of a wooden yoke. Hanging from the yoke are two large porous clay jars. Their surface is sweating as the water seeps through the ceramic to evaporate and provide a meager cooling effect when it is Khenti's turn. He reaches for the communal ladle, a hollowed-out gourd as the water hits his throat. He instinctively WTEs. It is lukewarm and tastes of the river, of silt vegetation, and the clay of the jar. But it is wet. The first swallow hits the dry limestone-coated lining of his throat and triggers a violent, racking cough. He spits out a slurry of white mud and water, his lungs protesting the intrusion. He drinks again, more slowly this time. Feeling the liquid travel down his parched chest like a cold needle. Is the greatest luxury he has ever known. Around him, the other men are slumped in various states of exhaustion. One man, an older laborer named Back, is rubbing his swollen knees with a grimace. The king must be planning to reach the stars by the next moon. Back grunts, his voice a rasp of sand. The overseer is pushing the sled crews like they're made of bronze, not bone. Khenti just nods, leaning his head back against the stone. The stone doesn't care about the moon. Back, he mutters. The stone only cares about the weight. They share a grim, silent understanding. There is no anger in their complaints. Only a weary, cynical acceptance of the order of things. They are the foundation of the world. And foundations are meant to be pressed. Khenti tries to close his eyes, to drift back into the green fields of his morning trance. But his body won't allow it. Every muscle that has stopped moving has begun to seize. The lactic acid is setting in, turning his thighs and lower back into stiff, aching wood. He can feel the heat of the sun lurking just inches beyond the shadow of the reed mats. Waiting to reclaim him, he looks at the water carrier moving on to the next gang. He wants more, but the jars are nearly empty. And the law of the site is strict. One ladle for the thirst. One ladle for the soul. Before the sweat has even stopped dripping from his chin, the foreman's staff thuds against a stone. Up. The sun does not wait for the weary. The break has lasted perhaps 5 minutes. Barely enough time for the heart rate to slow. Certainly not enough for the muscles to recover. Khenti feels a wave of heavy, leaden lethargy wash over him as he stands. His knees crack like the snapping of dry kindling. He steps out from the shade, and the Saharan sun hits him like a physical blow to the chest, instantly evaporating the moisture from his skin. He walks back to his block. He picks up the hot copper chisel. And the heavy mallet. The brief window of humanity is closed. The machine must grind again. The brief mercy of the water break is already a fading memory. Khenti returns to his assigned block. The heat of the quarry floor rising through his callous solace like a fever. He picks up the mallet and chisel. And within seconds, the rhythm is restored. Strike. Shave. Sweep. The white dust, which had momentarily settled, rises again to reclaim his skin. There's a strange, numbing peace that comes with this level of monotony, when the task is so repetitive that it requires no thought. The passage of time ceases to be a series of minutes, and becomes a series of impacts. He is no longer Khenti the man. He is a cog in a machine made of 100,000 men, all moving in a chaotic but perfect synchronization. If Khenti were to look up, he would see a landscape of focused, tedious industry. To his left, a gang of face cutters are working on the quarry wall itself. They don't move. They simply stand in a row, their copper chisels biting into the vertical rock face, carving out the deep channels that will eventually define the next block. They've been standing there since dawn, and they will stand there until dusk, their arms moving in a mechanical, agonizingly slow dance. Further down the quarry floor, the block organizers are at work. These are men with measuring cords and plumb bobs, checking the dimensions of the stones. They don't swing hammers. They speak in low murmurs and mark the stone with red ochre ink. Their work is just as tedious, just as dusty, but it lacks the violent percussion of Khenti's world. They move from block to block. A slow-moving line of clerks and a warehouse of stone. In the distance, beyond the quarry's edge, Khenti can see the hauling gangs. This is where the silence of the quarry is broken by the sound of collective human strain. A massive core block, the size of a small hut, sits on a heavy cedar sled. 50 men are harnessed to it, their bodies leaning forward at an impossible angle, their heels digging into the slick, mud-coated track. They don't run, they don't even walk, they surge, every few seconds. The gang leader calls out a rhythmic chant, and 50 backs straighten in unison. The sled groans. A deep wooden scream of friction, and the stone moves forward a single cubit. Then they stop. They breathe. They wait for the next count. This is how the pyramid is built. 1 cubit of agony at a time. To a man of the future. This scene would be a miracle, a testament to the heights of human ambition. To Khenti, it is just Tuesday. It is a day of sore shoulders and dry throats. He does not see the great pyramid as a monument to eternity. He sees it as a pile of work that never ends. There's nothing dramatic about the scene. There are no grand speeches from the pharaoh, no miraculous feats of engineering that defy the senses. There's only the clink of copper, the smell of sweat and hot limestone, and the endless crushing weight of the sun. It is a world of pure, unadulterated labor. As the late morning stretches toward noon, Khenti's mind enters a state of deep meditation. The sounds of the other gangs, the chanting of the haulers, the hammering of the cutters, the barking orders of the overseers, all merge into a single low-frequency hum. It is the white noise of the old kingdom. He finds himself watching a small beetle struggle across the white dust near his feet. It moves with a frantic, tiny determination, oblivious to the fact that it is walking through the most significant construction site in human history. Khenti feels a strange kinship with the creature. They are both moving through a landscape they cannot possibly comprehend. Focused entirely on the next inch of ground, he adjusts his grip. His palm is raw, where the mallet's handle has rubbed the skin through the limestone paste. He doesn't look at the injury. He simply shifts the wood to a different part of his hand. The work demands his presence, but it does not demand his soul. He gives his strength to the king, but his mind remains tucked away in the shadows of his home, waiting for the only thing that matters now. The signal for the midday meal. The sun is almost at the vertical. The shadows are shrinking to nothing. The peak of the day is here. The sun has reached its terrifying Thrown at the center of the sky, Dot and the quarry, shadows have retreated into the stones. Leaving a world of pure, blinding light, the heat has moved beyond a sensation. It is now a physical pressure, a weight that sits upon the lungs and vibrates against the skin. Then, the signal finally comes. A long, echoing blast from a ram's horn ripples across the plateau, the sound of 10,000. Mallet stops instantly. The silence that follows is not peaceful. It is heavy, a vacuum of sound that makes the ears ring. The great machine has paused to breathe. Khenti does not run. He does not have the energy. He moves with a slow, swaying gait toward a massive 5-ton block of limestone that sits at the edge of the transport track. It is one of the few places where a sliver of darkness, no wider than a man's torso, still clings to the earth. He collapses into the dust, his back against the stone, which is so hot it feels as if it might sear through his sodden linen kilt. Around him, the quarry floor is a graveyard of resting men. They are curled into the shadows of blocks, huddled under ragged mats, or simply lying flat on their backs with their arms over their eyes, looking like the very mummies they will one day become. With trembling hands, Khenti reaches for the linen bundle, an effort tied for him this morning. The fabric is stained with his own sweat and white stone dust. But as he unwinds the knot, the scent of home spills out. He pulls out the 2 loaves of emmer bread. They are warm now, heated by the sun through his satchel. But they are his life. He takes the onion, the white, pungent bulb that is the laborer's greatest treasure. He bites into it like an apple. The sharp, burning juice hits his tongue, clearing the chalky film from his throat and making his eyes water. It is a violent, beautiful sensation. The onion provides the moisture and the fire his blood needs to keep moving in this furnace. Next, he pulls out the strip of dry LAP. It is as tough as the leather of his tool bag, cured in the sun and packed with salt. He has to tear at it with his teeth, the salt stinging the small cuts on his lips. This salt is vital. It replaces what he has bled out through his pores all morning. He chews slowly, forcing his jaw to move, savoring the oily, fishy tang that lingers long after the meat is swallowed. He washes it down with the remainder of his water. It is lukewarm and tastes of the clay jar. But it is the final piece of the puzzle. The bread, the onion, the fish, the water. This is the alchemy that turns a weary farmer into a builder of pyramids. Meal finished, Khenti leans his head back against the limestone. He closes his eyes. For these 30 minutes, he is a free man. He is not a taxpayer, not a laborer, not a subject of the king. He is simply a creature in repose. He listens to the sounds of the break, the low, rhythmic mumble of a nearby worker reciting a prayer, the distant, hollow clink of a repairman sharpening a copper tool, the buzzing of a fly interested in the remnants of his fish. These sounds are small and human, a contrast to the mountain of stone looming above them. He tries to drift into sleep, but his mind remains alert, counting the heartbeats. He knows the duration of the mercy. He can feel the sun shifting, the sliver of shade slowly narrowing as the eye of Ra begins its long, slow descent toward the west. His muscles begin to stiffen as they cool, the salt and sweat forming a crust on his skin that feels like a second, tighter kilt. He knows that when he stands, the pain will be twice what it was before he sat. But for now, he keeps his eyes closed. He breathes in the dusty, hot air and finds a moment of profound, wordless peace. He has survived the morning. He has fed his body. He is ready, however reluctantly, to face the afternoon. If the morning was a test of strength, the afternoon is a test of the soul. The blast of the ram's horn sounds again, shattering the brief silence of the midday meal. For Khenti, standing up is an act of sheer willpower. His muscles, which had begun to stiffen in the shade, scream as they are forced back into alignment. His back feels like a piece of unyielding cedar, and his knees pop with a sound that seems dangerously loud in the heavy air. He steps out from the sliver of shade provided by the block, and The heat hits him like a physical blow. It is no longer just the sun above. The limestone quarry has become a thermal battery. The white stone has spent 6 hours absorbing the Saharan fire. And now it is radiating that heat back out. Standing in the pit feels like standing inside a baker's oven. The air is shimmering, distorted by heat waves that make the distant pyramids look like they are melting into the sky. Khenti picks up his copper chisel. It is hot, nearly too hot to hold. And as he inspects the tip, his heart sinks. The edge is gone. Hours of biting into the dense Tura limestone have blunted the soft copper, turning the sharp blade into a rounded, useless nub. Ideally, he would take it to the tool sharpeners near the supply huts. But the foreman is already pacing the ledge above, his reed staff twitching. There is no time for maintenance. Khenti must compensate for the dull tool with raw, brute force. Instead of the precise surgical taps of the morning, he now has to swing the mallet with a wider, more violent arc. Every strike sends a jarring shock through his wrists and up into his teeth. But the stone barely yields. He is no longer carving. He's bruising the mountain. Every movement now requires a conscious command from his brain. To lift the mallet feels like lifting a bucket of wet Nile mud. To sweep the dust feels like dragging his arm through deep water. The sweat that soaked his kilt during the morning has dried into a stiff, salty crust that scratches against his thighs with every step. The dust is worse now. The afternoon air is bone dry, and the fine white powder of the limestone hangs suspended in the stagnant heat. Khenti breathes through a scrap of linen he has tied over his mouth, but he can still feel the grit coating his lungs. His voice, if he were to use it, would be nothing but a rasp of sand. Above him, the foreman is a constant, dark silhouette against the sun. He knows that this is the hour when men break. He knows that this is when a hauler's grip slips or a cutter's aim falters. He doesn't shout as much as he did in the morning. Instead, he uses a rhythmic, low-frequency chant to keep the pace. The stone does not feel the sun, the foreman calls out, his voice steady and relentless. The stone does not tire. Are you less than the stone? Strike for the king. Strike for the great house. Khenti ignores the words but leans into the rhythm. The chant acts as a pacer, a way to outsource his willpower to the collective beat of the gang. He looks at the block before him. He has smoothed only a hand's breadth since the break. The task feels insurmountable. In the morning, he could see progress. Now, he only sees the infinite repetition of the chisel. He doesn't look at the sun anymore. To see how high it still sits is to invite despair. He keeps his gaze fixed on the white surface of the limestone, focusing only on the next inch, the next strike, the next breath. He is a ghost in a white hell, moving with the slow, inevitable persistence of the river itself. The afternoon has just begun, and the shadows are still hours away. But the mallet falls. Clink, clink, clink. The work continues, because the alternative, failure, debt, the loss of Matt, is unthinkable. By mid-afternoon, the heat has ceased to be an external force. It has moved inside Khenti's bones. Every breath he draws feels like swallowing a mouthful of hot ash. The air is so thin and dry that his lungs ache with the effort of extracting oxygen. This is the hour of true exhaustion. The deep, marrow-deep fatigue that turns muscles into lead and blood into sludge. He is moving in slow motion now. Every time he lifts the acacia wood mallet, he has to consciously command his shoulder to rotate, his bicep to contract, and his grip to tighten. The explosive power of the morning is gone, replaced by a heavy, sluggish momentum. Around him, the entire quarry has slowed to a crawl. The rhythmic percussion of the chisels has lost its crispness. The strikes are muffled, irregular, like the heartbeat of a dying animal. Khenti pauses. He doesn't ask for permission. He simply stops for a few heartbeats. He wipes his forehead with his forearm. But it does nothing. His skin is so thick with a mixture of sweat, limestone dust, and salt that it feels like he is wearing a mask of cooling plaster. His eyes are red-rimmed and stinging. The coal has long since washed away, leaving his vision vulnerable to the brutal glare reflecting off the white stone. He looks at his hands. They are trembling. A fine, persistent vibration in the tendons that he cannot control. The skin on his palms is raw, the blisters of the morning having popped and dried into stinging, open sores. He has to wrap a small scrap of linen around the handle of his chisel, just to keep the friction from becoming unbearable, like every man in the pit. Khenti has become a master of celestial geometry. He does not look at a clock. He looks at the shadow of the quarry wall. He measures his life in the inches of darkness that are slowly, agonizingly slowly, creeping back across the limestone floor. Only 3 palms more, he whispers to himself, his voice a dry croak. He is measuring the distance between the current shadow and the line that marks the end of the shift. But 3 palms of shadow can take an eternity to grow. When your back is screaming and your throat is a desert, the social fabric of the work gang is beginning to fray dot in the morning. There was a sense of shared purpose. Now, there is only shared misery. A laborer nearby drops his chisel, the metal clattering loudly against the stone. He doesn't pick it up immediately. He just stands there, his head hanging, his chest heaving. The foreman, usually so quick with a sharp word, merely watches. Even he is sapped. He leans heavily on his reed staff, his shadow stretching out behind him like a long, thin finger pointing toward the village. He knows that to push them any harder now would be to break them. There is a fine balance to the balance between the king's demand and the body's capacity. Despite the fatigue, the stone remains indifferent. The block, Khenti is smoothing, doesn't care that his heart is pounding in his ears. It doesn't care that he is dreaming of a cold jar of beer and the smell of his children's hair. The limestone demands to be shaped. Khenti closes his eyes for a second, drawing in one last shaky breath of hot air. He thinks of the grain jars at home. He thinks of the tax he owes to the gods. He thinks of his ancestors who built the smaller tombs of the past, and his descendants who will look at this great house and wonder who he was. He forces his fingers to close around the mallet. He resets the copper chisel. With a groan that is more of a prayer than a sound. He brings the wood down on the metal. Clink. It is a weak strike, but it is a strike. He is still moving. He is still building. The sun is failing, and as long as it hangs in the sky, Khenti will remain a servant of the stone. The transformation of the world begins with a shift in color. The blinding, white-hot glare that has defined the last 10 hours begins to soften, turning into a deep honeyed gold. For Khenti, this is the most beautiful moment of the day. The sun is no longer a predatory eye. It has become a weary traveler, sinking toward the western horizon, the realm of the dead. The heat does not vanish. It lingers in the stones like a fading fever. But the air itself begins to move. A slight cooling breeze drifts in from the Nile, smelling of wet earth and distant PAPYRUS. It catches the sweat on Khenti's shoulders, sending a shiver of relief through his exhausted frame. He stops. He stands upright, his spine clicking, like a series of small stones falling into place. He looks at his work. The edge of the limestone block is straight, smooth, and true. He has satisfied the stone. Khenti is not free yet. He hears the heavy, rhythmic thud of a reed staff against the ground. The foreman is making his final rounds. His face a mask of stern indifference. He moves from block to block, his eyes scanning for flaws, for laziness, for cheated edges. He reaches Khenti's block. He doesn't speak. He simply runs his callous hand along the edge. Khenti has spent the last 4 hours moving. The silence is thick with tension. If the foreman finds a gap, Khenti will stay while the stars come out. Finally, the foreman nods. A short, curt movement of the chin. It is Matt. He grunts. Acceptable for the king's house? Khenti exhales. A long, shaky breath that carries the weight of the entire afternoon with it. He is cleared. Now begins the most critical ritual of the evening. The return of the tools. In the Old Kingdom. Copper is more precious than human life. Every chisel is weighed. Every mallet inspected. Khenti gathers his tools. The copper chisel, now blunted and scarred. And the acacia wood mallet, its head mushroomed from thousands of strikes. He joins a slow-moving line of men heading toward the toolkeeper's hut. The mood is different now. There is a low murmur of conversation. The sound of men who have survived another day, but there is also an edge of anxiety. Careful with that copper. Back. A laborer ahead of him whispers. The keeper found a chip in Seti's chisel yesterday. They docked him half a jar of grain. Khenti reaches the window of the toolkeeper's station. A scribe sits there, his reed pen poised over a papyrus scroll. His inkpots of red and black ready to record the day's inventory. Khenti places his tools on the wooden counter. The keeper, a man with eyes like a hawk, picks up the chisel. He turns it over in his hands. Checking the weight, ensuring no part of the precious metal has been lost or stolen. He taps the mallet to check the integrity of the wood. After a moment that feels like an eternity, the scribe makes a quick, flowing mark on the papyrus. Khenti's name is cleared. He is no longer responsible for the pharaoh's property. As he steps away from the counter. The final ram's horn sounds. It is a long, mournful note that echoes across the Giza plateau, signaling the official end of the shift, all across the site. The remaining sounds of labor die away. The haulers drop their ropes. The cutters sheath their blades. Khenti stands at the edge of the quarry. Looking up, the Great Pyramid is no longer a white mountain. It is a giant silhouette of purple and orange against a bruised sky. The ramps are empty. The plateau is quiet. He's just a man again. A father, a husband, a farmer. His feet are heavy. His back is a map of pain. And his throat is a desert of dust. But as he turns toward the path that leads back to the village, he feels a strange, quiet pride. He has moved the mountain by a fraction of an inch today. He has earned his place in the world. He begins the long walk home, his shadow stretching out before him, reaching for the village where the fires are already burning. The horn has blown. But the labor does not end with a sigh. It ends with a line. Khenti joins the slow, shuffling procession of men, snaking toward the toolkeeper's station, a sturdy mud brick outpost near the quarry's edge. This is the bottleneck of the day. Thousands of men, their skin white with dust and their spirits hollowed by the sun, stand in a weary silence. The sound here is different than the quarry. It's not the clash of stone, but the low, rhythmic murmur of tired voices and the shuffling of bare feet on the hard-packed earth. Khenti feels the ache in his calves, intensified by the standing. To walk is one thing. To stand still while the body is screaming to collapse is another. At the front of the line sits the toolkeeper, a man whose skin is less weathered than Khenti's, but whose eyes are far harder. Beside him is a scribe, hunched over a long roll of papyrus. To the pharaoh. The copper chisel in Khenti's hand is a strategic resource, imported from the mines of Sinai, at great cost. Every gram must be accounted for. As the man in front of Khenti reaches the window, the ritual unfolds. He places his chisel on a wooden scale. The keeper inspects the edge, checking for deliberate damage or attempts to shave off pieces of the metal for trade. He looks for the stamp of the royal treasury. The scribe makes a quick, vertical tally mark on the papyrus, a black stroke that signifies one man has fulfilled his debt and returned his equipment. Waiting in the queue, Khenti finds himself shoulder to shoulder with Back and several other men from the Enduring Ones. They lean against each other, sharing the weight of the day. My mallet split in the last hour, Back whispers, showing a hairline fracture in the dark acacia wood. If the keeper sees it, he'll say I was striking the stone too hard. He'll take my beer ration. Khenti looks at the crack, rubs some limestone dust and sweat into it. He advises quietly. In this light, his eyes are as tired as ours. He looks for the copper. He cares less for the wood. They share a brief, cynical chuckle, a small rebellion of the working class against the bureaucracy of the gods. They talk of the heat, which they agree was the breath of Set himself today. And they talk of the walk home. There are no plans for the evening. No festivals. No grand meals. The plan is simply to reach the mat, to drink, and to disappear into the blackness of sleep until the sun demands them again. It is finally Khenti's turn. He places his copper chisel and mallet on the counter. The metal is still warm from the bays. Friction. The keeper picks up the chisel. Turning it over with a practiced, cynical hand, he feels the weight. He checks the blunt, rounded tip. The mark of a man who has worked hard, not a man who has been idle. The scribe doesn't even look up. He knows. Khenti's face by the rhythm of his arrival. The reed pen scratches against the papyrus. A dry, rasping sound that, to Khenti, is the most beautiful sound of the day. That tally mark is his ticket out of the quarry. Go, the keeper grunts. Sliding the tools into a wooden rack behind him, Khenti steps away from the window. He feels lighter, not just because the tools are gone, but because the responsibility is lifted. For the next 12 hours. He belongs to himself and his family. He walks past the guards at the site perimeter, their bronze spears catching the last purple light of the dusk. He reaches the edge of the plateau where the path begins its descent toward the valley. He pauses for one last look. The Great Pyramid is a dark, triangular void against the sky, full of emerging stars. It looks cold. Now it looks eternal. Khenti turns his back on the monument and begins the long walk toward the flickering fires of the village. He is no longer a builder. He is a man going home. The walk home is not the same as the walk of the morning and the dawn. The path was a line of anticipation. Now, it is a trail of recovery. As Khenti leaves the limestone dust of the plateau behind. The world undergoes a sudden, dramatic shift in color. The bruised purple of the twilight gives way to a deep, cooling indigo. The air, which has been a static furnace all day, finally begins to move. A breeze flows from the north, carrying the scent of the inundation, wet papyrus, blooming acacia, and the cold mineral smell of the rising Nile. Khenti moves with a slow, swaying gait. His body is no longer a tool of the state. It is a collection of aches. Every step on the hard-packed earth sends a dull vibration through his heels, up his shins, and into his lower back. His arms, which spent the day locked in a battle with stone, hang heavy at his sides, his fingers twitching with residual tremors. He is surrounded by hundreds of other ghosts. The thousands who marched in silence this morning now move even more quietly. There's no energy for talk. The only sounds of the rhythmic scuff of bare feet on the path, and the occasional clink of a water jar. They move like a slow-moving river of shadow, flowing back toward the life-giving valley. The path dips down from the dry, high ground of the desert and enters the palm groves that fringe the floodwaters. The temperature drops instantly. The thick canopy of the date palms traps the evening moisture, and the air feels thick and sweet. Khenti passes a stand of sycamore figs, their broad leaves whispering in the breeze. This is the Black Land, the Kemet, the fertile soil that defines his identity. For a brief moment, as he walks beneath the trees, the Great Pyramid behind him feels like a dream. A strange and distant hallucination of stone. Here, among the trees and the mud, is the world that makes sense. He stops for a moment by a small irrigation canal, now swollen with the silt-heavy waters of the Akhet. He doesn't drink. The water is too turbid here. But he squats down and plunges his arms into the flow. The cool water is a shock to his system. It washes away the white limestone crust from his skin, turning his forearms from the color of a corpse back to the deep, weathered bronze of a living man. He feels the sting of the water and the raw blisters on his palms. And he welcomes. It is a clean pain, a sign that the day is truly over. His mind begins to focus on the small, singular goals of the evening. He thinks of the reed mat, the way the woven fibers will feel against his aching spine. He thinks of the bowl of lentils, or the piece of dried fish Nefret might have saved for him, but more than the food. He anticipates the stillness dot to not have to swing a mallet dot to not have to listen for the foreman's cry dot to not have to brace his body against the weight of the mountain dot. This is the true reward of the corvée, not the grain rations or the promise of the afterlife, but the profound holy luxury of simply stopping dot as the path rounds the final bend. The village comes into view dot. It is a cluster of dark geometric shapes huddled against the edge of the flood, but it is no longer silent. He can hear the distant, high-pitched laughter of children, the barking of the village hounds, and the low, comforting murmur of hundreds of families gathering around their hearths. He sees a flicker of orange light in the doorway of his own house. Nefret's fire, the smell of wood smoke and toasted emmer grain reaches him across the dusty air. Khenti straightens his back, forcing his tired legs to find a final burst of strength. The desert is behind him. The stone is finished. He is almost home. As Khenti enters the narrow, dust-choked streets of the workers' village. The heavy industrial weight of the plateau begins to lift. The air here is thick with the smell of life. The scent of goat dung, wood smoke, and the sweet fermented tang of beer. He's only 20 yards from his doorway when he hears it. The frantic slapping of small feet on the hard-packed earth. AMUN and little TIA burst from the shadows of the lintel to them. He's not a quarryman or a taxpayer. He is the center of their world. TIA clings to his dust-caked leg, her small hands leaving clean prints on his salty skin. Aemon, trying to look like a man, reaches for the empty satchel on Khenti's shoulder. In this moment, the deep ache in Khenti's lower back recedes, replaced by the only thing that makes the limestone bearable, the continuation of his bloodline. Inside the threshold, he finds Nefret. Her day has been no less grueling than his. Though her quarry was the home, her arms are dusted with flour, and her eyes are weary from hours of tending a smoky hearth and a heavy loom. They share a brief, silent look. A collision of two lives spent in the service of survival. There is no need for grand greetings. In Old Kingdom, love is expressed through the presence of bread and the safety of the roof. Khenti does not sit. He knows that if he allows his muscles to go cold now, he will not be able to rise again. He moves through the dark interior of the house to the small, walled courtyard at the back. This is his second quarry, against the mud brick wall. He tends a small, sunken garden plot. In the fading light, he inspects the rows of leeks, the broad-leafed lettuce, and the pungent green tops of onions. This garden is the difference between a meal of plain bread and a meal that sustains. He picks up a heavy ceramic jar, filled earlier by Nefret from the canal. With a slow, careful motion, he pours a thin stream of the silty Nile water at the base of the plants. He watches the parched, cracked earth drink it in with a thirsty hiss. In this dry land, water is more than a liquid. It is the physical manifestation of hope. In the corner of the courtyard, two scrawny, rust-colored hens peck at the dirt, searching for a stray grain of emmer. They are lean and temperamental, producing eggs only when the gods feel generous, but they are a vital asset. Khenti coaxes them into a small, woven wicker coop for the night. He secures the latch with a piece of knotted flax, his fingers moving with a gentle precision that belies the violence of the mallet. He swung all day. He does this to protect them from the jackals that prowl the edges of the desert, and the neighborhood dogs that roam the village. To lose a hen is to lose a week's worth of protein. It is a loss his family cannot afford. He stands in the center of the small courtyard, his hands on his hips. The sky above is now a deep velvet black, salted with the first bright stars of the Egyptian night. He looks at his garden, his birds, and his house. He is exhausted, his body a map of blisters and bruises. But as he turns back toward the orange glow, he feels a quiet, grim satisfaction. The king's pyramid has grown by another inch today. But more importantly, his own house has stood firm. He ducks back inside, leaving the dust and the stone behind. The day of labor is over. The night of the family is beginning. The hearth is glowing. But before Khenti can sit to eat, he must shed the mountain dot in the corner of the main room, near the large storage jars. Nefret has prepared a shallow basin of fired clay. Beside it stands a heavy jar of Nile water, settled throughout the afternoon, so the thickest silt has sunk to the bottom dot in the morning. Washing was a quick awakening. In the evening, it is a sacred necessity. Water is precious. Every drop was hauled by hand from the canal. But to keep the limestone dust on his skin is to invite the cracked, fever, and the sores that ruin a laborer's career. Khenti stands over the basin and begins to pour the water over his shoulders. As the liquid hits his skin, it doesn't run clear. It turns into a thick, milky gray sludge dot. This is the day's work, literalized. A slurry of pulverized Tura limestone, desert sand, and dried salt. He uses a rough, abrasive square of coarse linen to scrub. He starts with his face, wiping away the white mask until his true features emerge from the dust. He scrubs his chest, his arms, and finally his back, where the sweat and dust have formed a gritty paste in the hollow of his spine. The sensation of the cloth against his raw skin is a mixture of stinging pain and exquisite relief dot as he works the cloth over his calloused hands. He spends extra time on his palms. He washes the dirt from the open blisters, the cool water acting as a balm to the heat of the friction. He watches the water in the basin grow darker, a murky soup of his own exhaustion dot with every pass of the cloth. He feels the weight of the pyramid diminishing, the feeling of the dust being lifted. From his pores is almost spiritual. Dot is as if he is peeling off the identity of the state slave. And finding the skin of the father underneath dot to be dirty is to be at work. To be clean is to be home dot once he is dry. He reaches for his evening kilt. This linen is different dot is not the coarse, sweat-stiffened rag he wore in the quarry. This kilt is slightly softer, woven with a bit more care. And most importantly, it is clean dot it carries the faint grassy scent of the sun and the river where it was bleached dot as he wraps the fresh linen around his waist and ties the knot. The transformation is complete. The fabric feels cool and light against his scrubbed skin, a stark contrast to the heavy damp garment he wore all day, for a few brief hours. He is not a tool. He is a man of the Kemet, the Black Land. Khenti stands tall, breathing in the air of the house, which is now free of the quarry's chalky tang dot. His muscles still ache, and his feet are still swollen, but the simple act of washing has restored his dignity. He feels refreshed, his mind clearing along with his skin. He looks down at his hands. They are still scarred and rough, but they are dark and clean. He is no longer a ghost of the plateau. He is a man ready to sit at his own hearth. He gestures to Amon and Ta, who have been watching the ritual with wide eyes, and moves toward the center of the room. The ritual is finished. The man has returned. Outside the low door of the house, in the small open-air cooking area, Nefret is engaged in the most important ritual of the day. The sun has vanished, leaving the village in a velvet darkness, lit only by 1,000 flickering cooking fires. Khenti watches her from the doorway. She is crouched over a small tripod of stones, nursing a fire fed by dried animal dung and scraps of palm fiber. Perched on the stones is a rounded clay pot, its bottom blackened by soot inside. Something is bubbling, a thick, rhythmic sound that promises the restoration of his strength. The smoke from the fire rises in a thin, straight line toward the stars, carrying with it the aroma that defines Khenti's world. Tonight's meal is a dense, nourishing pottage. Nefret has combined the remains of the morning's emmer grain with dried lentils, a handful of leeks from the garden, and a heavy dose of crushed garlic. Is a humble dish. But in the Old Kingdom, garlic and onions are considered medicine for the laboring man, believed to protect the blood from the fetid winds of the desert. As a rare treat, she has added a few small pieces of salted catfish, which she has shredded into the stew. The salt from the fish seasons the entire pot, creating a savory steam that makes Khenti's stomach growl with a sharp physical demand. This is not just food. It is fuel for the mountain he must climb tomorrow. His mother sits in the shadow of the doorway. Her back against the mud dash brick. She is silent. Her wrinkled hands resting in her lap. Her eyes fixed on the bubbling pot. To her, this meal represents the continuity of the house. As long as there's grain in the pot and a man to provide it, the family survives. Nearby, Almond and Lil Tiaye are playing a game with smooth river pebbles. But their movements are distracted. They circle the fire like moths. Their eyes darting toward their mother's stirring spoon. They are hungry with the honest, hollow hunger of children in a world where food is never guaranteed. The smell is intoxicating. After 10 hours of breathing, nothing but limestone, dust, and the metallic tongue of copper. The scent of boiling lentils and salted fish is almost overwhelming. That is the smell of safety. That is the smell of the black land conquering the red land. Nefret uses a wooden ladle to stir the mixture, the steam rising to dampen her face. She tastes a drop from the back of her hand, her expression unreadable. In this moment, she is the alchemist of the household, turning the raw elements of the Nile into the life force of her family. As the stew thickens to the consistency of a heavy porridge, Nefret gives a small, sharp nod. The signal is understood immediately. The children abandon their stones. His mother shifts her weight. Preparing to move, Khenti steps forward into the orange circle of the firelight. The family forms a tight ring around the central pot. There is no table, no chairs, only the earth beneath them and the stars above. The air is cooling rapidly now that the sun is gone, and the heat from the cooking fire feels good against Khenti's aching joints. The meal is ready. The labor of the day is finally, truly over. For the next hour, there's only the warmth of the fire, the taste of the grain, and the presence of the people who will make the stone hauling worth the cost. As the final purple bruises of twilight fade into a deep obsidian black, the world outside the village walls disappears. The great limestone plateau is gone, swallowed by the night. All that remains of the universe is the small, pulsing orange heart of the cooking fire. The family squats in a tight circle on the packed earth, their knees almost touching. This is the most sacred formation in Khenti's life. The circle of the hearth. Nefret ladles the thick, steaming porridge into simple clay bowls. It is a dense, gray-brown mixture of lentils and grain. But in the firelight, it looks like gold. They eat with their hands, using pieces of the eternal bread, crusty, dense hammer loaves, as scoops to catch the thick stew. The silence of the workday is finally shattered, not by the foreman's shout, but by the high melodic chatter of the children. Amun, his chest puffed out with pride, tells his father about his day. I carried the water jar from the canal 3 times today, father, he says, his eyes bright in the firelight. Mother said my arms are getting as thick as a wrestler's. Khenti reaches out and squeezes the boy's shoulder. He feels the small, developing muscle, and a bittersweet pang hits him. He is proud of the boy's strength. Yet, he knows exactly what that strength will be used for in only a few years' time. Little Tiaye, her face already smeared with lentil paste, giggles as she tells a story that only half makes sense. About a beetle she chased into the neighbor's grain store, and a goat that tried to nibble on her hair. Nefret shakes her head with a weary smile, recounting how she had to fish the toddler out of a basket of unspun flax twice before noon. Khenti listens, a slow smile spreading across his face. These small, domestic dramas are the antidote to the crushing weight of the limestone. To the pharaoh, these children are future laborers. To Khenti, they are the reason the sun rises. His mother eats slowly, her movements deliberate and shaky. She dips her bread into the pottage, chewing with the careful focus of the very old. She doesn't speak much, but her presence is the anchor of the group. She has seen 70 inundations. She has seen the Great Pyramid grow from a mere foundation to a mountain. When she finally speaks, her voice is a dry rasp. The lentils are good tonight, daughter, she says to Nefret. They have the salt of the sea in them. It is a rare compliment, and Nefret bows her head slightly in acknowledgement. They pass around a single large clay jar of second-run beer. It is thin, watery, and has very little of the morning's punch. But it is cool and clean. Khenti drinks deeply, letting the liquid wash away the last of the quarries grit from the back of his tongue. He passes the jar to Amun, who takes a small, respectful sip, and then to Tia, who leaves a tiny, frothy mustache on her upper lip, causing the whole family to break into a rare, collective laugh. The meal is not delicious in the way a nobleman's feast might be. There are no spices from Punt, no honey cakes, no roasted waterfowl. It is bland, salty, and repetitive. But to Khenti, it is the finest meal in Egypt. The satisfaction doesn't come from the flavor. It comes from the context. It is the taste of a task completed. It is the taste of the body receiving what it has earned. As he scrapes the last of the porridge from his bowl with a thumb, Khenti feels the heavy, leaden weight of exhaustion beginning to turn into a warm, sleepy glow. The fire is dying down to embers. The bowls are empty. The day has been survived. With the meal finished, the heat of the mud brick walls becomes too much to bear. Khenti moves to the threshold and sits on the small stone step outside his door. The transition is profound. The sky has deepened into a bruised, royal blue, and the air has finally lost its predatory edge. A soft, cool wind pulls moisture from the Nile, carrying the scent of wet earth and night-blooming jasmine into the cramped alleys. In the morning, the village was a place of frantic, silent preparation. Now it has become a living, breathing tapestry of sound. The narrow streets are no longer just thoroughfares. They are communal living rooms, without the harsh glare of the sun. The village awakens in a different way. He hears the high-pitched squeals of children, among them, playing a game of hounds and jackals in the shadows, their small forms darting between the flickers of distant fires. He hears the rhythmic, melodic rise and fall of women's voices as they gather on a nearby rooftop to finish the day's gossip and spin a few last lengths of flax from a house down the lane. The thin, wailing cry of a newborn pierces the air, followed by the low, shushing hum of a lullaby that has been sung in this valley for 1,000 years. A few doors down, a group of men, quarrymen, haulers, and carpenters, are huddled in a circle. They aren't standing. They are slumped against the walls, their bodies silhouetted by the dying embers of a communal fire. They talk in low, gravelly tones. They aren't discussing the glory of Pharaoh. They are talking about the price of grain in the local market, the rumor of a double beer ration for the upcoming said festival, and the persistent ache in their collective shoulders. Khenti watches them, but he does not join tonight. He prefers the solitude of his own doorway. He watches a scrawny, rib-thin dog slink past, its nose to the ground, searching for a discarded fish bone or a scrap of leathery bread. The animal's ribs catch the firelight, a reflection of the precariousness of life in the village. The most striking thing about the evening is the darkness beyond the small orange halos of the cooking fires. The world is absolute. There is no artificial light to challenge the night. The village is an island of flickering warmth in a sea of obsidian. Khenti looks up because there's no glow from the earth. The sky is a terrifying, beautiful explosion of light. The silver river, the Milky Way, arches directly over the Great Pyramid. A celestial mirror of the Nile below. To Khenti, these stars are not distant suns. They are the imperishable ones, the souls of the blessed dead who never set. He finds the star of the great hunter and wonders if his father is looking down from that cold, bright height. The village is beginning to settle. The fires are being covered with ash. To preserve the embers for the morning, the loud laughter of the children is being replaced by the stern, hushed commands of mothers calling them. Inside. The industrial roar of the day has been replaced by the domestic sigh of the night. Khenti feels the night air cooling the skin on his arms, the stone dust that usually clogs. His mind has finally settled. He feels a strange, fleeting sense of peace. In this darkness, the pyramid is invisible. The king is distant. The debt is paid for today. There's only the cool wind, the smell of his family's hearth behind him, and the vast, silent protection of the stars. As the last embers of the village fires are banked beneath layers of gray ash. The weight of the day, 10 hours of heat, stone, and strain, finally descends on Khenti with a crushing finality. It is as if the gravity of the great pyramid itself has followed him home. His eyes feel heavy, as if coated in the very limestone dust he spent the day washing away. The world outside has gone silent. The imperishable stars now rule the sky. He turns from the doorway and steps into the deep, cooling shadows of the house. The interior is dark, lit only by the faint orange heartbeat of the hearth that Nefrin is carefully burying in sand to preserve the spark for tomorrow's dawn. Inside, the household is already surrendering. His mother is a still, thin shape on her mat in the corner, her breathing slow and rhythmic. Little T.I. is already gone, lost to the deep twitching sleep of a child who has spent the day running. She's curled into a small ball, oblivious to the world of kings and monuments. Amun lies nearby, his eyes wide and glassy in the dark. He's trying to stay awake, perhaps to ask his father one more question about the great house. But the battle is lost. As Khenti watches, the boy's eyelids flutter and close, his jaw relaxing into the heavy slackness of exhaustion. The next generation of the enduring ones is at peace. Khenti moves to his own sleeping area, a low platform of mud brick covered with a thick woven reed mat. He unties the knot of his evening kilt, letting the clean linen fall away. He lies down, and the sensation is almost overwhelming. The mud brick, which absorbed the Saharan sun all day, is still radiating a gentle, lingering warmth into his back. To a man who has worked in the heat, this warmth should be a curse. But against his aching muscles, it feels like a poultice, drawing the tension out of his spine. He feels the individual fibers of the reed mat beneath him, a familiar texture that signals the end of his service. He rests his neck on the wooden headrest. The WERES dotted is a curved, hard block of sycamore wood that keeps his head elevated, allowing the air to circulate around his neck, and protecting his ears from the scorpions and beetles that sometimes move across the floor in the dark. In the first few minutes, the wood feels stiff and unforgiving, but as his body lets go, the discomfort vanishes. He stares up into the darkness of the rafters. His mind makes one final weary circuit of the day. The white glare of the quarry, the taste of the onion, the weight of the copper chisel, the sound of the hauling sleds. It all feels miles away now, like a story told about someone else. The self that labored for the king is dissolving. Khenti's breathing slows. He feels the pulse in his hands, the rhythmic throb of the blisters and the sore tendons. But even that is fading into a dull, distant hum. He is no longer a builder. He is not even a father or a husband. He is merely a living thing, returning to the void of sleep to be rebuilt. Outside, a jackal howls at the edge of the desert, a lonely, haunting sound that marks the boundary between the living and the dead. Khenti doesn't hear it. The darkness of the house has become total. With a final deep sigh that releases the last of the day's stress, he slips into a heavy, dreamless sleep, the only true payment the stone hauler ever receives. Tomorrow, the horn will blow again. But for now, there is only the silence. The camera of the mind begins to lift. We leave the small mud brick room where Khenti's chest rises and falls in the rhythm of deep exhaustion. We rise above the village, where the cooking fires have died to gray ash. We rise above the Giza Plateau, where the Great Pyramid stands as a jagged, dark tooth against the star-crowded sky. From this height, Khenti is no longer a man. He is a single stitch in a tapestry that stretches across 3,000 years. He is the heartbeat of Egypt. In only a few hours, the first gray light of dawn will touch the tip of the great house. The ram's horn will blow, its mournful note rolling across the valley like a command from the gods. Khenti will wake. His muscles will be stiff. his blisters will sting, and the taste of limestone will still be in the back of his throat. He will tie his kilt. He will take his bread. He will walk the same path, through the same palm groves, to the same white pit. Tomorrow, the sun will be just as hot, that the copper will be just as dull. The formative staff will thud against the stone with the same relentless cadence. Strike, sweep, move. Khenti's life is not a straight line. It is a circle as perfect and unbreakable as the sun itself when the Akit flood recedes and the black mud is revealed. He will trade the mallet for the plow. He will walk the same fields his father walked, scattering the same emmer seeds, praying for the same rainless sky when the stalks turn gold under the heat of the Shemu sun. He will swing the sickle until his back aches, just as it does tonight doth then. The river will rise again. The fields will vanish beneath the silt. And the king will call. He will return to the stone. Year after day, season after season, the cycle continues. Unchanging, unyielding, eternal. History will tell stories of whips and chains, of a million slaves broken under the lash of a tyrant. But the truth is more profound and more human. The pyramids were not built by the sound of the whip. They were built by the sound of the heartbeat. They were built by men like Khenti, farmers' fathers and sons, who gave their labor as a sacred obligation to the balance of the world. They did not work because they were forced by man, but because they were bound by Mat, the cosmic order that keeps the stars in the sky and the river in its banks. In a repetition, there is a kind of holy peace. There's no anxiety of the unknown. Tomorrow is certain. The work is hard, but the work is his. Khenti's father died with the dust of this quarry in his lungs. In 10 years, young Amul stands in the same spot, his hands callousing over as he learns the weight of the acacia mallet. He will marry a girl from the village. He will feed his children the same salted fish, and he will look at the finished pyramid, already ancient in his eyes, and know that his father's sweat is sealed inside those stones. The individual vanishes, the name is forgotten, but the work remains. The pyramid rises stone by stone, not through a single miracle, but through 10 million ordinary days of ordinary men. The Nile flows in the distance, a dark silver ribbon that has seen the birth and death of 1,000 kings. Is the only thing that moves in the Egyptian night. The heat of the day has finally dissolved into a cool velvet silence. The ancient world is asleep. Khenti is asleep. In his dreams. Perhaps he is back in the green fields, where the water is cool and the stone is soft. He has done his part. He has added his grain of sand to the mountain. The camera fades to black, leaving only the sound of the wind through the palms and the rhythmic, distant lap of the river against the mud. The cycle is complete. The night is deep, and the stone waits for the dawn.